Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Spell. Happy New Year to everyone who's been listening to us. This is basically 2022 now, and we are firming up our plans as to the kind of topics and the kind of guests we're going to have on our show in the coming months. But for today, we are going to just talk about ourselves, our say resolutions, or how we reflected on 2021. So I for one want to make this quite a kind of a fun session and can't promise that we have great mindful takeaways, anything that's too philosophically heavy, but hope you stick around, listen to what we have to say, and that, indulge in our conversation into what's going on in our lives, what we have learned, and what we hope to see in 2022. So guys, first off, how are you all feeling for this year?
I'm actually feeling energized and optimistic. I think last year was a year of a lot of discoveries for me. And this year, I'm just looking forward to exploring those discoveries even further and, yeah, uh, going deeper into some of these practices that I discovered.
Okay, we want to hear about that later on. Santosh?
I'm feeling more grounded, centered, and a bit more secure in myself. Um, and I have a kind of a rhythm that I'm settling into in terms of my inner work. So yeah, I'm focusing a bit more on the inner work this year and the transformation from inside out. So that's something I'm really looking forward to. Working less outside, but more inside.
Okay. So I hope you guys, have ways to expound on what you just said. So obviously I sent you guys kind of a list of questions to tackle. So let's go through the first one, really, which is, and maybe let's start with Santosh first, since you just talk about inner work. So I think everyone's curious to hear about that. So what I asked is that, what are the top, say 3 to 5 lessons you've learned from 2021, and it's going to be very open-ended, so it can be from personal events, current affairs, books, films, but knowing you, Santosh, is probably a lot of spiritual work. So yeah, take us through.
Yeah, I think the lessons I've learned time and again is I have to do my inner work. If I want to be effective in society or in my interpersonal relationships, the inner work is fundamental. Yeah, and I've realized that there were quite a number of community conflicts that I had to mediate and reconcile, and they weren't very successful. So they're like, I feel capabilities and skills that I need to develop within myself. And I think I also need to reorient my my own understanding of activism in society. Yeah, I want to be a bit more of a pacifist, a bit more of a hermit, moving forward, a bit more like of a recluse. Yeah, as I like withdraw myself and do the inner work. Yeah, and there's a saying, there's a lesson that I learned that, and it's time and again. I think it's something that you're all very familiar with. The outer world is really a reflection of my inner world, and we do not see things as they are. We see things as we are. And I've been like literally projecting a lot of my own trauma or beliefs or my patterns, my patterns of relating in the work that I do. And I think it's time that I go deep within and I find a peace within myself and not look for peace in a society that's difficult to find peace in.
So I'm not trying to be difficult here, and actually I kind of also, now that let's give some context for everyone. So we all don't really know each other that well. We're not like friends for several years. I think pretty much we all got to know each other only last year, right? Am I right?
Yeah, I think I only met you, Douglas, for the first time last year, and Santosh as well physically. Yeah, I mean, I was in a conference together with Santosh the year before, but that was virtual.
Right. So, Santosh, I guess my question to you is seeing that how you want to be a bit more pacifist or reclusionist, how does that square with you being on our channel? So yeah, now on a public facing, you're speaking out. You can't help but speak out because we don't want you to be quiet here. So how do you square that, right? Or do you mean more like your direct engagement with community work? Do you mean like you plan to scale that down a little bit more and work more on yourself?
Yeah, no, I think philosophy is definitely very important in terms of societal or systems change. So that will never change. And I would very much like to preserve that. In terms of community work, I would like to scale that down a little bit and go deeper into like the inner recesses of my mind. Yeah. And in fact, philosophy would help with the inner work. Yeah. So breaking the spell is a great vehicle for inner transformation, which has been always a fundamental lever for change in society. Yeah, because if we are about breaking spells, so we are about shifting paradigms, shifting the way we look at things. Yeah, it's a lot about inner work. Yeah, so I see both as being very complementary and instrumental parts of societal change.
And in terms of community work, I just want to make it like really understandable for our viewers, right? So can you describe a little bit like how much time you put in it? Can you describe the experience of like your emotion involvement? Do you feel like you give a lot of yourself to working with, which I assume to be marginalized, disadvantaged folks? And it's hard to see returns. Just take us through what it feels like experientially for you.
Yeah, I think it's a thankless job as a community facilitator. It's tough, and it can get to a point where we resent. The resentment builds in the psyche, and I don't want to get to that stage. Yeah, so I feel like there's a lot of inner peace I need to cultivate within myself before I go out into the world. And like things like participatory democracy in Singapore, that's going to be a 30-40 year long timeline. Education in Singapore with another organization that I'm working with, that's going to be a 30-40 year long project. So these are, and then looking at race, religion, gender, class, and trying to heal divisions along these lines. Those are like generational work. So I think I need to find a more sustainable way or a more regenerative way of doing that. Yeah, because you can burn out very easily. Yeah, and I think for me, I'm susceptible to a complex. It's called the hero or the martyr complex. I think Douglas and Unsu might be familiar with this. And a lot of this stems from maybe childhood trauma, where in my attempts to get validation or approval, I position myself as a hero in a very unconscious way. Yeah, so I need to go deeper into like what's driving this desire, to want to save the world outside, which is very difficult.
Yeah, actually, don't you think almost anyone that works in activism or community work has suffered from that? So one is the burnout. That's one very common syndrome, especially if they're very heavily involved. And then the second one is the hero complex, right? I think everyone, actually, I wouldn't even say that necessarily it has to be something that's exclusive to activist politics. I mean, I think even if you are, say, working in a financial institution, a banker, sometimes they have that complex to think that what they're providing saves the world too. I'm still just feel free to jump in.
A climate activist, I can't remember her name, but she has a very simple Venn diagram to help people avoid burnout and to really focus on what they just really need to do in this moment. And so just 3 areas that you identify for yourself. You figure out what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, and then what needs to be done. And it's the overlap of those three that is probably the area that you could just focus on without getting burnout. So yeah, I think avoiding burnout in the community worker and activist space is just really critical. And I'm just really fully supportive of Santosh's idea to become a hermit and a recluse for a while so he can do some inner searching. Because I've spent a lot of my life doing that, and I feel I've benefited from it. And now I'm actually going the opposite direction of Santosh, where I feel like I've been a hermit too long, and I need to just get out there and talk to people, work with people, and it's tough. It's not easy. It's tiring, but I think if you take care of yourself first and you have a lot of self-empathy, it can be also very rewarding.
Maybe you want to share what lessons you have learned then, Onsu, like from 2021. We can see some common themes with you and Santosh.
I don't really know if there are lessons. I actually just wanted to share some passions that I discovered. Well, one of them is a passion. So there's this note-taking app called Obsidian, which I discovered at the beginning of the year, and I became really obsessed with it. It came out in like beta form, so I signed up to be a beta tester, and I just discovered this really cool community. And what I love about Obsidian is just some of the principles that this software is designed around. So all of your files sit on your desktop locally. They're just plain text files. And so like compared to other note-taking apps, you really own your own data. And I think this is a direction that I really appreciate this technology going in, because so much of technology today is moving the opposite direction, where you have software as a service, and all the information that you generate, it resides on some cloud somewhere. And if you want to get your information out, it's just really difficult. There's like this, crazy exporting and backup process. So I like the fact that these software designers, built something that prioritize keeping your information under your control. And then the second thing I like about it is that it makes it really easy to link all your knowledge. So you can create nodes and create links between them. And for someone like me, who's a thinker and I love reading and following intellectual rabbit holes, Obsidian is like the first note-taking app that felt like it could move at the speed of my own thought. So it was a sheer pleasure just like reading, writing notes in it, and creating, my own personal Wikipedia almost. I just encourage viewers to watch out for Obsidian, because I think in the next few years, it's gonna it's gonna be a big thing. And so, that was one passion. I'll stop there and let you guys respond.
Oh man, you should have got a sponsored ad. You should have got them on to sponsor our video. You're gonna praise this software so much.
Actually, they're not a big company. So the other thing that I'm impressed with, it's written by 2 Canadian software developers. And it was only later on that I realized they're a couple. And then also that while they were writing the software, they had a baby. And so I was just blown away at how productive and effective they were. And they actually built a great online community which helped them make their software better. And so it just goes to show, actually, you don't need a huge software company or huge teams of people to create good technology. These days you can still do something when you're just a 2-man team.
Yeah. I don't know. Does this allow you to have linkages between different documents? So it becomes a mind map that resembles a lot more like the neurons in the brain, or, maybe it's modeled after the way we learn and the way the brain functions and the way like networks of different neurons in the brains function and fire together. Yeah, so I don't know, it could be like the next big thing because of that element of human mimicry or biomimicry.
Yeah, no, there's actually a lot of note-taking apps that are trying to move us towards that. So network knowledge and the idea of your notes as like a second brain. And I was actually led to this app because I was interested in this note-taking philosophy called Zettelkasten, which was created by, I think he's a German sociologist, Luhmann, and he had this complex, this was like, I don't know, decades ago, he had this complex note-taking system where he would write each note on an index card, and then each index card had a unique identifier. And then because of that, he could start linking his notes. Like in one index card, he would say, oh, refer to this other card, to follow this thought. And he spent decades building like his index card file. Like he had cabinets and cabinets of these index files. And then he said one day, he realized, oh, it's like a second brain. He's having a conversation with his own notes. Like it would have its own intelligence because of the way it was networked. So yeah, no, I think there's something interesting going on where, we've gotten to the point where like Wikipedia and Google are so big and so vast that it's almost quite empowering to create my own little sort of Wikipedia, right? My own little curated corner of this universe. Because otherwise, like it's like the universe of Wikipedia and Google, it's just too vast that I just get lost in it.
Yeah, I do, like, I'm not very familiar with all this. So I guess it's more like I'm always curious about what the potential is for this kind of apps. And there's a term for them, right? Like they're kind of like a kind of decentralized, what do you call it? Creative Commons kind of software. Is that the right term? And where this is going? And I don't know whether this is, getting way too wayward in terms of what I'm trying to deduce, but do you see any common themes between this kind of independent development and things going on with, what's currently very hot to talk about right now with blockchain technology, crypto, this kind of movement to get away from giant institutions, financial institutions, technological institutions, and to kind of develop your own decentralized, autonomous platforms?
Yeah, no, it's definitely part of this trend towards decentralization. So the way the programmers also set up Obsidian is that they made it very easy for users to write their own plugins. So they built, this basic functionality into the program, and you can make it as minimal as you want. So if you don't need all these features, you can just turn it off. So unlike Microsoft Word, you can have a very minimalist work environment. But if you want all the bells and whistles, you can actually turn them on. And then at this point, most of the features are being written by the users. So if someone wants like a day planner function, they actually like wrote a plugin for that. If someone else wants like a emoji functionality in it, they'll write a plugin. And so at this point, there's like hundreds of plugins that people have written for it. So they've created this whole ecosystem where it's decentralized, and it's really tapping into the collective intelligence of a whole community. And to me, that's one of the more promising trends that I'm seeing, or actually not promising, but even necessary, because I think there's also a very powerful trend towards centralization, control, surveillance. And so I really appreciate movements like this that go in the opposite direction.
Yeah. Santosh?
No, yeah, so this reminds me a lot about the open source movement.
Yes, that's right. That's the word, open source. Yeah.
Open source and distributed apps. So like, yeah, now with the blockchain, then you can build distributed apps. So instead of Facebook or Instagram or even Zoom that's owned centrally by one company, the entire software for doing video conferencing, social networking can be distributed in an entire blockchain where yeah, people offer energy and resources to keep the platform alive. Yeah, and power is not concentrated in just one entity. It's distributed in the entire. Yeah, and we studied this when we were in the EDB. So I was futures. I was doing futures at EDB. So I was tasked to look at 30-year, 40-year long trends in the horizon, just to see what would be an important bet to lay our economic resources on. Yeah, so blockchain was definitely one of the things that we were monitoring. Yeah, and it's amazing to see how it's progressed this year.
Okay, then I have a big question for both of you. So do you see this whole entire movement, right? And the way I look at it is very, it's very anarchist-like, right? And I don't mean that in the negative sense, like it's messy, but in a sense, there's so many offspring, so many independent developers. Even if you take a look at, say, cryptocurrency, right? There's so many what they call indie coins or altcoins. So anyway, what I'm trying to lay out here is to ask both of you, like, are you looking forward to that kind of future where everyone is kind of doing their own thing, becoming less reliant, dependent on the central institutions of society? So instead of, say, putting money in big banks, as an example, small example, you put money into something else, right? So many people now put their money into cryptocurrencies, for example. And then, say, when it comes to emails and, also you use this app to write your notes. So you don't use Microsoft products, you move on into other more independent products. So yeah, so that's my question. Like, do you look forward to do you think that's a great future for all of us? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could go very quickly. Sorry.
Go ahead, Santosh.
Oh, no, I mean, I could go, like, it's a double-edged sword. Like any technological advancement, the problem is not the technology, but it's the human ego. So if you have cryptocurrencies and if you have distributed ledgers for financial transactions, then you have, on the flip side, the human ego's tendency to do money laundering, to obscure, like lots of financial transactions that are illegal. Yeah, so that's the, like, drugs and like payment for drugs, which can be obscured. Yeah, so that's one challenge. The other challenge is like the initial fundamental feature of blockchain was that it's supposed to be immutable. Like you can't change it and it's not susceptible to hacks. But recently I've heard reports of like it not being susceptible to hacks actually. So yeah, cryptocurrencies and blockchains, they aren't necessarily like 100% security proof. Like, yeah, there are still some security risk with these technologies. Yeah, but the overall thing is we learn as a global community when it comes to building such platforms or applications. And there's this thing called learning by doing gains. So the failure of hacks and financial transactions which are fraudulent is just a stepping stone to a new kind of financial flows or economy that would be better than the one before. So it's just progress of like the way we want to transact with one another or the way we want to collaborate with one another. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say that like regarding cryptocurrency, I'm really by no means an expert. My only concern about them is that a lot of them seem to be very energy intensive. So I think one estimate is that just to power the servers that drive Bitcoin, you need like 10% of the world's energy, which is to me quite ridiculous. So I'm a little skeptical about whether they're on the whole they are a good thing. And I think it's interesting that Douglas, that you brought up anarchism in relationship to this, because I also recently signed up for an interesting project related to Obsidian. A professor in Minnesota, I think, or Massachusetts, somewhere around there, he started a David Graeber book club to discuss David Graeber's latest book, The Dawn of Everything. And it was a book club that would also use Obsidian so that we could make collective notes. So he shared his Dropbox folder, And then everyone who's part of this book club, there are about 30 people, they write their notes into the same folder. And, you know, as people who, some people may know, David Graeber is a famous anarchist. He was involved in Occupy Wall Street. And the reason why he was an anarchist was because as an anthropologist, he studied so many different societies. And yeah, he saw that it is possible to live without hierarchy. So it was interesting because when I just started joining his book club and then seeing the notes, within the first week or 2 weeks, there was a lot of chaos because people were writing the notes. There was no structure. You know, anyone could add a folder, add a note, create links. There were a lot of like titles with no notes there. So it was very confusing for me. And at first I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I like this. It's like, it's not very accessible. It's just very chaotic. But what I saw was over like a period of 2 to 3 weeks, this self-organization started happening. People stepped forward to organize things. People created like maps, entry points, and all of a sudden, like you could see, like this thing became much more user-friendly within a period of weeks. You know, like someone created like a program that showed you the last updated file, so you could see, you know, what edits people made. So you know, to me, I think it's an experiment. Like, I don't know where chaos or decentralization will lead. It might end up badly, but that's why I'm interested in observing where experiments like this go. And I think it goes back to what Santosh was saying. It comes down to the people involved and what the intention is. If you have enough people stepping forward and trying to do something constructive, then I think it's great to have decentralization and absence of hierarchies.
Yeah, I definitely concur with you, the point that you made about crypto and how energy intensive it is. I can't remember the exact statistic right now, but it's something to do with like one Ethereum transaction equates to 8,000 or so Visa transactions. So those figures are staggering. It doesn't make sense for that to be the case. And then on the decentralization component, so you know, it's quite funny. I do like have people around me who are crypto enthusiasts. They promote it quite a lot. They are definitely making money off of it. And this topic about decentralization comes up, and I actually try to inform my friends about how, oh, you know, this is not like some new concept that is that the financial institution, financial world gotten word of. I mean, sociology, history, political science. You know, we have dabbled and wrestled with the idea of decentralized authority and political institutions, and so it's really not such a novel idea. The question is how it's going to work and function, right? And then lo and behold, Wall Street Journal just released a news report saying that even in the world of crypto, where it's being heralded as a place of great, well, some people would equate it to some kind of market democracy, while there's still very high inequality levels there because a huge number of the people who hold shares or percents, you know, very high holdings in crypto, it makes up only 1% of the people who own crypto. So, I mean, the inequality level in crypto is even higher than in real world in terms of wages, in terms of wealth. I'll try to look up the Wall Street Journal article and try and link it when the video is up. But yeah, you know, so it actually goes to show it's quite hard to escape this idea that we have in society. I mean, this reality we have in society where as long as a certain group or cohort of people have a huge amount of power, yeah, even when you have very decentralized platforms and institutions, these people can still capture a lot of that wealth, yeah, and privilege.
So I feel like I've kind of like really sidetracked us or dominated the conversation with my like highlight of 2021. So Douglas, want to share what your highlight was or a few highlights from last year?
Okay, I think I'm over prepared because you guys have shared a couple of things and I wrote quite a number of notes. But yeah, and look, I just want to start by saying first, I think one good way to kind of preface our the themes that we talk about, right? So, for example, Santosh, I mean, I think it's important to contextualize it. So, Santosh is, for example, someone who is kind of like a community activist, right? You work with a lot of people who are marginalized, disadvantaged, and I don't have the kind of opportunity to work with people like that. You know, that's not my job. Unsu, you're out there making great connections, talking to people of all sorts of from all sorts of circles, trying to find bridges. Again, not my job. That's not what I do. So I want to, you know, present my thoughts based on where I am and, you know, the kind of people I interact with so that it gives some context, right? So I think one of the things, at least within our channel, that we do talk about quite regularly is the idea of changing minds. And I think for 2021, especially with the vaccine, with the rollout of the vaccine, with social distancing measures, with the way people are reacting to the pandemic, we are now confronted with this crisis of like changing minds, and it's on our mind all the time. Like, how do we get people to change their minds about what is an appropriate way to deal with social crisis or to garner support for social justice movements? And I kind of given up on that. I think for 2021, you know, my lesson is that it's not about changing minds anymore. It's not about looking for quick returns. It's about planting seeds. And there's an essay that I wrote that at least Onsu is familiar with, where I said that I don't see myself as an activist. I just see myself as an active participant of society. And that's the way I kind of frame my thoughts, which is I'm not going to go out there and try to pretend that I'm an activist and I'm the best representative of a social justice movement. I'm just really out there being someone who wants to plant ideas, and I want to spread ideas. And I think what really, at least for me, a good book that which I haven't talked about on this channel yet, so hence I find this opportunity, opportune moment to bring it up, is this book called Stop Being Reasonable, written by this philosopher called Elanor Gordon Smith. So the way the book is structured is that this author, Elanor, I mean, she used to be a first-class debater. She prided herself as a philosopher in rationality and debating people and getting people to listen to good arguments and understanding arguments. And in doing so, she hopes that people would change their minds. But in this book, she decides to go against the grain, so to speak, against what she's been so familiar with. And I gave Onsu at least one example. So the one example she did talk about in quite publicly is a guy who slept her butt on the streets and catcalling. So she was very used to catcalling. So she decided to undergo this experiment to talk to these men. And one guy that she focuses on, she spent a good 3 hours or so just talking to him, trying to get him to understand that it's not good, right? It's not ethical to go around catcalling women or to slap them on the butt. Yeah. And even after 3 hours trying to talk sense to him, where it's non-confrontational, she wasn't, trying to be angry or being a heretic about it. After 3 hours, it was like the guy said, okay, fine, I get it. Like slapping, someone on the butt, it's not good manners, but he was not convinced by every other argument she gave regarding female rights to privacy and all the ways that men, take advantage of women's politeness, in the catcalling and all that. So anyway, so that's one example. But the other example that I really like, so I'm going to just finish with this example and then kind of let you guys respond. Is this person that she used as part of a case example in the book? Is this person was in a religious cult, and this cult, right, is a very, very well, I don't want to use the word pathological, but it's definitely very, very religious, very conservative. It has it's a cult group that talks about apocalypse coming. The governing body is made of all males. They also have very strict enforcement rules about their believers, about their followers, that they should not mix with people who are not believers. An interesting thing about her participant, this person that she interviewed, was that she talked to him and his wife was not a follower. His wife actually married him knowing that he follows this cult and believing that she can change his mind, that after marrying him she would do her best to change his mind, and she had a kind of like a 5-year plan to change the guy's mind. So I'm going to spoil the ending because this is the killer bit, okay? So what happened was that the guy eventually did get out of the cult, but it wasn't due to the sound arguments from his wife. It wasn't due to someone convincing him. I mean, he actually was very familiar with a lot of the criticisms that the cult got. Well, what happened was in their group, right? So he and his wife follow a particular pastor, and the pastor they were talking to the pastor about something within their family, and the pastor gave a very off-the-cuff remark, kind of demeaning the wife, kind of like saying that, well, I don't really care too much about what she thinks or something like that. And instantly, that was the catalyst that made the guy rethink everything, because he suddenly realized that for this pastor that he respected so much, right, he actually showed, well, you could argue in inverted commas, his true colors, that he actually, for all the things that he preached about, he didn't believe in it, and he actually showed a lot of disdain to his wife. And so I realized that actually, through this book and there are many other examples, but I find that this particular example really stands out to me, that what really a person like me can do is not try so hard to change people's mind, but just to plant seeds, right? Like I said, so just spread ideas. And eventually, I think these people will have the epiphany when the moment comes. And I think it also shows up politically, like on a social level, social scale, with Trump supporters as well. So if you read like some of the news reports and analysis of Trump supporters, those who have eventually turned against Trump, what actually happens eventually is that when he stops supporting them literally, so for example, the people who went to the Capitol riot, so those who were part of that siege at the White House, like when Trump stopped supporting them because he promised them that he would, but he didn't, obviously, that's where they turned their backs against him, because they realized, okay, this guy's full of shit. He didn't really mean what he said, that he would support them. So I think that's the way I kind of see like how human beings are, which is I think they need to be given their own time, and they need their own moments to realize, certain truths. Maybe it might never come because not everyone gets out of a cult, but some people do, and it will come to them, when it's appropriate. Yeah, and I think the most for people like us to do is just to be out there and to be supportive, because usually when they come out of a close group, it's very traumatizing. It is a shock to their world, and they just need to believe that even if they get out of a very inclusivist close group, there's still other groups, other community groups out there that would welcome them. So yeah. So whatever you guys want to say.
I'll just share like my reflections. I was laughing at myself when you were saying that, Douglas, and I think it's so apt that you shared that. So as you're planting seeds, right? I think what I was doing last year in 2021 is I was lifting the soil to see if the plant is growing. Then I put the soil back. So I was like trying to force the plant to grow, like, try to grow the movement or grow, Yeah, so I really like what you're saying, like plant the seeds and create the conditions. Yeah, but what has shifted I've shifted my attention from also like just wanting to grow things or nurture things to the idea of composting. Like there's a lot of things that are left behind. And I began to learn about fungi, the mycelial network, and composting, like both the physical composter and composting as a metaphor. And it reignited a lot of passion and purpose in me. Yeah, and like I want to now look at waste in society. Yeah, so like not just physical waste that we see, right? So like physical waste, you have a freegan movement, the likes of Daniel Tay, and he goes around looking for like food that is left over, and then we redistribute it in society. But more so like people who are left behind in society. So Unsu and I, we are part of this thing called the Trauma-Informed Community Development Network. Yeah, it's a community, and we look at people who have some trauma. So these are people who were left behind, right? And the idea of composting is really about their emotions and their trauma that they have not fully digested and assimilated in their bodies to become whole and integrated human beings in society. Yeah, so I want to look at composting from the emotional lens. Yeah, and looking at people who don't fit in the industrialized linear pipeline for GDP growth. Yeah, so very essentially, if you want to, green peas, right? Green peas. Yeah, so you want to take out the covering, the shells, So what do you do with the shells? You throw them away. Then you have the peas that move along the assembly line, and then someone eats it, and then we don't know what to do with the waste after that. Yeah. So at the beginning you have the shells, and at the end you have the waste. So like people in this industrialized version of economy, there's some who don't fit in, and some who fall out of the assembly line. And then some who, they are just thrown out, they're disposed. Human beings are disposed. Like this whole idea of disposability, and being used. And that's where I think like composting is such a beautiful mindset to look at people who are used and disposed. So like, and emotions. So I was just laughing when you were talking about planting seeds. So thanks for the encouragement and the inspiration.
Sure.
I love all these gardening analogies, seeds and composting. Not sure if I have one of my own, but I do like the idea of planting seeds and what you talked about as far as like not trying to change other people's minds. That actually connects with another of my big sort of highlights or discoveries or learnings from last year. Last year was also the year that I got really deep into what's called nonviolent communication, which was developed by Marshall Rosenberg. I mean, I'd known about it for a couple of years, but I think last year was where I made a commitment to like join like a 10-month course and to undergo, to adopt it as a continuous practice. And I was really just inspired because I started noticing that a lot of the people that I admire, as far as their presence and what they bring to groups and especially like moments of conflict, they're all trained in nonviolent communication. And so a lot of what, it's really hard to describe what nonviolent communication is, but it's kind of a pathway towards empathy and connection. And I think, it has a lot of insights about how if you shouldn't really try to change someone else's mind because that's actually very coercive. The best thing you can do is show empathy and try and really figure out like what are the fundamental needs that are driving them, that is driving their behavior and that is driving their beliefs. I mean, it could be some, need for security or whatever, but the underlying needs that drive people are actually universal. That's the common ground that we all share. We all have a need for love, connection, play, growth, discovery. And what we do to meet those needs are individual strategies. So we may have different strategies to meet those needs. And that's where we conflict with each other. You brought the example of people who are vaccinated and non-vaccinated. Deep down inside, they're actually driven by the same needs. They have the need for safety, belonging, connection, respect. But they just go about it with different strategies. So if we can have that awareness, we can go below the strategies to what we have in common. And that's what I've really gotten out of nonviolent communication.
Yeah, so you and I, we have talked a lot about how we have differing views about how we think we should approach this. So even though I did set up, for me to talk about how I'm also looking at this from the vantage point of just trying to plant seeds and not forcibly, coercively change mine. Because anyway, I do hang around with people who have very different views from us, and I can see that I can eventually change their mind or let them be more receptive to. For example, say leftist thought or to looking at the economy as one that's made of a lot of inequality and injustice. If I just kind of share my thoughts, let them digest it, take some time to chew on it, and then eventually they start to see it my way, right? But you mentioned this interesting word, different strategies. And that's actually also the second my follow-up to my first line of thought about planting seeds. So I believe in the idea of planting different types of seeds. Because although you are right, Unsu, that people do have very universal basic needs, but also people respond to all kinds of different kinds of stimuli and more importantly, works of art and the things that we produce. And the idea that I want to, well, at least the thing that I've learned from recently reading this book. So this is a book that just came out not too long ago. So it's by Paul Bloom. It's called The Sweet Spot: The Pleasures of Suffering and the Search for Meaning. There's too much to say about the book, so I'm not going to try not to go through that here. But essentially, what Paul Bloom advocates is that we need to look at human beings as being driven by very pluralistic psychologies. They're not always necessarily going to go, they're not necessarily hedonistic creatures, and that they wouldn't just simply strive for sites of pleasure and activities of pleasure, but there is also motivation to do things that can be what he considers suffering. So, for example, he gives one very obvious one is BDSM. So that's one. But even not looking at that as an example, he talks about like if we train for a marathon, where we raise our kids, where we watch a tragic, sad movie, when we relive painful memories. I mean, these are all very unconventional things that people do. And he even gives us, this is the most recent thing that I read of the book, where he says when people were bored, they were put in this experiment, they were bored to tears, if there was nothing to do. They found it even more gratifying to shock themselves because, even though it's painful, but they would rather do that than to be bored out of their minds. So I think human beings are very complex, and I think that, like, when I talk about different kind of seeds, right? I'm talking about the idea that where we produce works of art, like to me, I think that it needs to be really multifactorial. There needs to be all different kinds of ideas out there. Ideas that can be very unpalatable, ideas that can be very contrarian, and I'll talk about that a bit later if we have some time. But yeah, the idea to me is that I want to be the kind of person that is receptive to different sorts of ideas, even things that may be very distasteful. But I want to listen to it. I want to engage with it. Yeah. So that's kind of my second lesson. So yeah. Santosh?
Oh gosh, like if there are certain people I would like to engage with to understand their point of view, you probably know who these people are because I've shared my displeasure with the way they have treated certain members of our society. But yeah, I think that will be a good exercise in empathy building. Yeah, so I think it's a very powerful thing. Yeah, I would like to. So this inner work that I'm doing, it's quite powerful. What it's saying is that the people who we feel are oppressing us are actually a reflection of things within ourselves that we are actually having a certain amount of resistance towards. So they are just reflections. And if you go deep inside yourself and you go and you search for that resistance, you'll be able to attain this state of what we call inner liberation. Yeah, so like outer liberation is actually a function, or it's directly linked to inner liberation. Yeah, so I want to explore that idea. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that, Douglas and Unsu. Yeah, building empathy and creating connection and seeing common ground in our needs. And it was very powerful. Something for me to think about.
Okay, so let me ask you point blank, right, Santosh, because as you said, right, there are people that, let's just say they're oppositional to your point of view, right? But how do you want to build empathy with them? I'm curious, just genuine question.
Okay, I will not actively seek out, seek their presence and say, oh, okay, I would like to build empathy with you and I want to know what your point of view is. Like, I don't think that's the case. It's just like if I encounter anyone who I have a certain resistance towards, and it's a very organic thing, then I'll try to practice that meditative introspection in that moment, just to go deeper within myself. Yeah, so it's not an active thing. It's just a reactive mechanism.
I mean, I can maybe try and give an example of what Santosh is talking about, and it's related to like Carl Jung and his concept of the shadow. So Carl Jung is another thing that I started last year. Like I started like Jungian dream analysis, so I know a little bit about it now. Like So, for example, if I meet someone who's very shameless and asking for favors, like this person will just go to Douglas and Santosh and go, "Hey, Douglas, can you do this for me? Can you, can I borrow this from you?" And I usually have some kind of judgment of these kinds of people because, like, I consider myself someone who's very considerate. Like, I'm very considerate of your time. I won't want to impose on you, and yet, here's this person being very shameless. So what Carl Jung would say is that this person, if you notice that you have a very strong reaction to someone, there's a high chance that this person represents some aspect of your shadow. So like very early on in my life, I may have repressed that part of myself as a kid that would just ask for something. Hey, can I have that chocolate or whatever? Like you just repress it, right? And then that was my strategy, my survival strategy for getting love, for getting connection or whatever, was to be considerate, to not make a nuisance of myself. And so over time, you become identified with that strategy. But then, the person who's asking for stuff, like that's a strategy that they learned when they were younger. And it could be just as legitimate. I mean, we're always telling people, just be honest, say what you want, follow your heart. So that person is just kind of actually doing that, right? And so I think if you can identify that, oh, this person that you really don't like, and you look inside yourself and you try and find ways in which maybe you might be like that if you gave yourself permission, or that is a part of yourself that you've repressed, then you might have more empathy towards that person.
Very deep thoughts here. I want to take a second to think about it. Yeah, I mean, because, yeah, okay, well, I guess my first reaction is that I can think of how this is so nuanced, right? Like there are people I can think of who I may not like, but I know that the reasons for not liking them is not like as if it's a personal reason, but perhaps also because they represented a certain vice. And that vice, I actually now I'm very careful to consider whether it's deliberate or whether it's a failing. It's something that I definitely picked up from my episode with Ian James Kidd on misanthropy. I started to also be more careful with what I label as a deliberate act of um, a deliberate, act where this person willingly wants something so badly that he is being malicious and selfish, or where this person clearly is in dire need of something, and in trying to strive to fulfill that need, he overlooks social etiquette or the consideration of others. So I think there's always very gray areas that in that sense. And I am thinking of times in my life where perhaps I may have disliked someone, and that is born out of envy or jealousy, because certainly being someone who's engaged in physical endeavors, you look at someone who's got everything, he's super strong, he's super good looking, and it sucks that it's not you, right? So and you wish you could own part of that. But now that I'm older, more mature about this, I also for a long time now have kind of discarded feelings of looked at feelings of envy as something unhealthy to have, and just become comfort my own skin. So in that sense, yeah, I think it all depends. Yeah, there are certain cases where I agree where you're coming from, also certain cases where I do think you can introspect and you can see that there may be valid reasons why you may dislike someone, because maybe that person is also emblematic of a certain vice, and it's okay to feel that it's not something we condone. So yeah.
By the way, I also want to comment on what you had said earlier about being open to art, like art coming in a lot of different varieties, because I think
Yeah.
art is a great window or pathway into a non-moralistic way of looking at the world. Like as someone who has aspired to be a writer in the past, and I've also been a filmmaker, I've always believed that the best art was not the art that sought to teach a lesson. And I think people are very sensitive to that. Like if a piece of art is too moralistic, I think you kind of pick up on that, and it really loses its power. Yeah, I think the most powerful art out there just really tries to, like, that artist, first of all, is doing something just for themselves. They're not trying to teach the world something. It's just something that is in their system that they're trying to get out. And that gives it its uniqueness. But secondly, yeah, they also have the capacity to look at the good and bad in life and not judge it, and just put it all in that work of art, and let you kind of decide for yourself how you feel about those things.
Okay, this now gets into something that I did have planned to talk about, but why not you go ahead first, Santosh?
No, so I mean, just like quick reactions. Shadow work is something that's dear to me, and I'm diving deeper into it. And yeah, I've had a lot of people telling me, Santosh, that's your shadow. That's that part of your shadow. Yeah, and I'm beginning to see how all of this is connecting. I have, like personally, I have got problems with receiving and requesting. Like I can't seem to request, and there is a certain type of identity that's tied to it, an identity that's based on self-reliance and independence, yeah, which is not tenable in the future as I become more interdependent.
Is he cut off?
Sorry.
I think
Yeah,
there's a Douglas's connection may have been, we may have lost him for a little
Oh,
bit.
okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Santosh, where were you?
Yeah, no, I was just saying that like I have maybe blocks within me for requesting and then receiving. Yeah, so it could be praise, admiration, love, or forgiveness, or yeah, anything like, yeah. So I'm just exploring part of that, healing as well. And so the reason why that block came about is maybe because I developed an identity around being a person who was self-reliant and independent. And for me, being non-self-reliant or mutually dependent with other people was seen as maybe weak or not something I aspired to be to do. Yeah, so that's something that I would like to explore in my shadow, which is to like communicate and make requests and then to receive like graciously. Yeah, so I think that's something I'm working on. And Douglas, like with regards to this, just something like, you know, you've got a safety net in me. If you see all of those people with great like abs and bodies, you have a person here who's just got one app, just one large tummy, yeah, to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, I mean, I have great assurance in you. Yeah. So I just want to say, I don't know how it was on both your ends, but I actually, the video stopped and freeze for me a little bit. So I think I didn't catch a lot of the beginning part of what Santosh said. So forgive me that I didn't catch all that. Yeah. So yeah. So let me just so Onsu, if you have something to respond, just respond. Do you have?
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I mean, so picking up from where you were at, Onsu, right, about non-moralistic works of art, and you know, we had that conversation with David Egan in our interview with him, where he talks about how great art. I mean, there is first thing to be said. There is a debate within philosophers, and he used Leo Tolstoy and Oscar Wilde to talk about how they define great art very differently, and in that sense, that crux of the argument or question is, you know, is great art moralistic or should it not be, something like that. So I'm obviously simplifying a lot here. I that's why going back to my earlier theme of planting different seeds, right? I don't even want to have an opinion about that. But for me, what I have come to define for myself, at least my lesson for 2021, is that I think there's a role. Everyone has a role to play, and I think, you know, when I look at, say, I compare and contrast myself against both of you, I know I occupy a very different role. Someone here could be the optimist, someone here can be the mediator, and maybe that's not me. Maybe that's not the role that's suited for me. So I think I've become a little bit more comfortable in my skin to being the contrarian, or in this case, David Egan actually in his conversation said something about the virtue of being a devil's advocate. And what he means by that is that someone needs to be there to just probe deeper, ask very critical questions, and just offer a contrasting point of view, because not everything in life is going to work a certain way. And I'll use a bit of philosophy just to explain what I mean. So there is this guy, this very ancient Greek philosopher known as Diogenes. So he is a very controversial figure. He was exiled, moved to Athens, and he criticized many cultural conventions of the city. So he's one of those philosophers that's well notorious for just sleeping and eating in the streets. But he said one very famous line. He declared himself as a cosmopolitan, a citizen of the world, instead of being a patriot to one particular place. When Alexander the Great came over to ask him a question, he told Alexander the Great, just step off my light, you're blocking my view. And he made a virtue out of poverty. And he had all this like philosophical stunts where he would carry a lamp around the city and he said, I'm looking for an honest man. So, I mean, look, so this guy obviously is very controversial, like I said, but I'm thinking of a very modern day equivalent. And I don't know whether Santosh may know this person, but I think Unsu, you do know who I'm talking about, Ricky Gervais. So Ricky Gervais is a comedian, he's a entertainer, and so for Santosh, I'll just try to explain a little bit. So in a lot of the movies that he makes, right, Ricky Gervais just comes off being himself, which is very cynical, he's very bad-tempered, quite nihilistic, very prone to offending others. So you know, he would just curse and give out a lot of slurs. But with Ricky Gervais, right, there's a certain trope that he always plays on, which is look beyond the aesthetics and the surface level of this character, and you see there's something very humane about this person. And just like the ancient philosopher Diogenes, both characters are not obsessed with superficialities of life. They're always looking for something deeper. It's just that the way they come out about it can be very rough, very coarse. The other thing about Ricky Gervais is that you know, he's been invited to the Golden Globes many times, and usually when he's there as the MC, he would attack, you know, Hollywood. He's accused them of enabling Harvey Weinstein. You know, he said that if ISIS started a channel, they'll be their agent. So I mean, what I'm saying is that like a person like Ricky Gervais fulfills a certain function. I mean, he's not, you know, to Hollywood elites very likable in that sense, and his act can be very uncomfortable, very charmless. But I think it fulfills a certain role. And I also wanted to just end sort of this 2021 reflections, right, with the most recent film out there on Netflix called Don't Look Up. So this film, right, which is made by this guy called Adam McKay and a co-writer called David Sirota, who's an independent journalist. So Don't Look Up is a very blatant moralistic narrative. It's in fact a tale about climate change, because what happens in that show is that there's a comet heading towards Earth, and you got two scientists that's trying to warn the world about this comet. But what happens in the movie is that their pleas for, you know, trying to save humanity gets whitewashed by the media, and they even get co-opted. One of the characters, which is played by Leonardo DiCaprio, gets co-opted by the system. So anyway, here's the thing, right? This just as a way to just sum up my line of thought. So the thing with this show is that, of course, it caught a lot of criticism because elites are not happy with the way that they are portrayed in the movie. But people that we respect, like Peter Kelmers, the climate activist, George Monbiot, the Guardian environmental writer, they said that this movie really represented to them what they feel. They say they're living it every day, that this movie, Don't Look Up, right, brought up so many themes that was very real for them in real life, even though this movie is a satire. One good example from George Monbiot is that the character of the Jennifer Lawrence, the female scientist, because when she was on TV in the movie and she said that, you know, we are going to die, you know, we need to do something, she was being ridiculed by the media. And George Monbiot said the same thing happened to him when he cried on public TV about his climate anxiety. He got ridiculed, he got mocked. So, you know, to me, that's kind of where I am right now, which is I think I want to, you know, when I talk about planting seeds, right, I want to empower this kind of narratives, because this is one thing that the movie has done. It has made the voice of these people, the climate scientists, the environmentalists, feel heard. And, you know, I want to be in that position to say that, you know, this is real, this is what people are feeling. And even though it is very moralistic, and it's fine, you know, I don't consider Don't Look Up a great piece of art. It's not a masterpiece, but it serves a function. And you know, I think for me, I like to continue to defend such works of art. Yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, no, I've heard good things about it, and I haven't seen it yet, but it's
Oh shit!
on my list.
Right, right. Okay, I haven't spoiled anything, by the way. I haven't spoiled
Yeah,
anything.
no, I kind of know roughly what it's about. So yeah, you
Yeah.
haven't spoiled anything for me. Um, yeah, I'm it. As you were talking, I started thinking about works like pieces of literature from the past that I actually think are great, that are kind of moralistic. Like one that comes to mind is Voltaire's Candide. Um, and yeah, if you read it, it's written in a very like uh, there is almost like a moral at the end of it. But I think maybe the distinction is that you can have a moral, but uh, great writers find ways of bringing out the full complexity of the situation. So, maybe one way to elevate like Don't Look Up to an even greater, like, uh, sort of to being a greater work of art would be if even the climate denialists were to watch it and they could actually sort of see themselves in it, that they're not being caricatured, that they feel, oh, this actually also captures, my point of view. So, like, yeah, it was great that Don't Look Up really made the climate scientists feel that it represented their feelings very accurately. And yeah, I don't know, someone like Shakespeare would be able to incorporate even more points of view and feelings into that.
Yeah, a lot of this reminded me of Adam Kahane, who looks at like very complex societal issues, country to country conflicts or intra-country conflicts in Africa. And he wrote a book on this, like the art of like bringing people together, and it's called Collaborating with the Enemy. Yeah, so it's really about like, yeah, looking at the enemy as a sort of blessing for us to do our inner work. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, what you said resonated with me. Yeah.
Okay,
and,
let me. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's the African proverb, right? When there is no enemy within, there is no enemy outside. Yeah, so it's really like the inner work again. Yeah. Sorry, Douglas.
No, I was going to say, sorry, I think the connection is not so good. So sometimes it looks like you stopped. So I just want to give my apologies.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just thinking, because I'm quite surprised to see the time. We went on quite long. So I just want to switch focus and actually, everything we've been saying actually probably will segue quite well into basically the next question, which is just going to take up the rest of our session, which is what's your main priorities to work on for 2021? Sorry, 2022.
Santosh, you go.
Yep.
Okay, so I think for me it's three main areas: ancient wisdom, indigenous wisdom, and elders' wisdom. So yeah, I think like those are three buckets that I want to like go deeper into, like being with elders in our society and our community. Both of you are elders, like for me. So yeah, so just being with elders is very important. Then indigenous wisdom and ancient wisdom. And yeah, within the branch of like ancient wisdom, one thing I want to uncover is the secret of the breath, and how the breath can help us regulate and influence our emotions. Yeah, so that's something I want to do a deeper dive into. Yeah, and if I can help to unlock the secrets of the breath in helping people to heal, integrate, and assimilate or digest their trauma and their negative emotions, that will be a major breakthrough, not only for me, but for a lot of people who are going through immense suffering in like society and community. Yeah, so like that's one thing I want to dive deeper into, which is the breath. James Nestor wrote an entire book on breathe. Yeah, and he's outlined a lot of the latest research on the breath. Yeah, so my breathwork practice, my yoga practice, and my meditation practice will be like the cornerstone of what I intend to do, like in this year, as part of my inner work. Yeah, I think like something else that came to my mind. So like there's breath. Something else in ancient wisdom that I'm also exploring, it's the idea of mortality or death. Yeah, so I just got to go on a nature walk with a death doula. So like we have birth doulas or midwives who usher people or children into to being alive. There are those who usher people like in the transition from life to death and to what happens after that. And it's a very, very profound journey. Yeah, so I want to explore the whole idea of death. There is this Tibetan 9-point contemplation of death that I would like to indulge in more often with community members. It's a very powerful contemplation on death, and I would like to do that with community. Then there is also a philosopher, a Central Eastern philosopher, Gurdjieff. He's written a very nice philosophical contemplation called The Last Hour. Yeah, so it's a beautiful piece on like just simulating the one last hour before we die. Yeah, so death is something else that I want to like study and do more research on, and have conversations with community. Yeah, so the same way we, throw the trash out into the bin, we don't want to look at the trash or what is disposed of. And human beings, we don't want to confront death. We don't want to see the dead people. Like we want to put them in hospitals and in mortuaries, right? We don't want to put them in our homes. Yeah, which is quite, yeah. So I want to like just re-examine my understanding of death. Yeah, and then like if there's something to meditate on is to be truth to myself. So I think in Hamlet, Shakespeare, he delivered a very timeless challenge through the character Polonius, and it's called like this above all, to thine own self be true. Yeah, so to one own self be true, to be true to oneself. And how I relate to that is to be more authentic in what my truth is, and not to have a mask or an armor when I'm relating to people. So to speak very, very truthfully and authentically, and to express my deepest truth without fear of reprisal. Yeah, something I want to work on. Yeah, family, parents, and nature are also things that I want to be close in touch with. So with regards to nature, I want to rewild my mind. Like I want to be more wild. Yeah, so like uncivilize myself, rewild myself, undomesticate myself. So be wilder. Yeah. So be less civilized as a human being. I want to be more. So I want to be in touch with the elements like the sun, the sky, the sand, the soil. Wow, studying the soil is so amazing. It's so exciting. Like to learn about soil and how soil relates to gut health, which relates to mental health, and the interdependencies of soil and the gut. Like it's amazing and fascinating. So study the soil, study the sea, be with the sea. Yeah, so those are like some things I want to do. And if there's one last thing, it's to be like a bit more mischievous this year. So I want to just be a bit more mischievous. The reason why I'm saying this is I just recently watched a documentary. It's about joy and it's a documentary between Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, two like very enlightened people right on this planet, and they came together and they filmed their interaction. It's crazy. You got to watch how they relate to each other. They're like 5-year-old kids. They are joking, they're pulling one another's legs. Like it's just amazing. It's such a joy to watch. And they say you have to be mischievous. We are mischievous. Yeah, and like that is permission for the rest of humanity to be less serious and to be more playful with one another. And my hope is that the three of us, as we age, and we get to the age of Desmond Tutu and the Dalai Lama, and as we interact, we'll be a bit more mischievous and playful with one another.
That would be great. Yeah, I would love to be more playful and mischievous as I get older. Yeah, hopefully the older you get, you just don't care anymore. You don't care what people think, and wow, Santosh, you're not ambitious at all for your year. You really haven't. You're not trying to do very much. Man, that was quite a list. I resonate with all that. Like, if I had the time, I would love to pursue all those things. Sign me up. Yeah. I think if I actually bothered to list everything that I wanted to do, it would be just as long. But there's a part of me that doesn't really believe in like New Year resolutions, and that like this kind of way that we compartmentalize our time. And so a lot of what I find I do is just circle back to things that I'm already doing or forgot about, and it's like, oh, I wanted to, like, I really enjoyed meditation. Why did I stop? I should start that again. So yeah, meditation definitely is something I want to do more of this year that I didn't do as much last year. And I don't know, I think the big themes for the past couple of years for me, starting from maybe 2-3 years ago, has been one, to be a good student of neoliberalism. This was something that it was a comment made by this mystic anarchist named Elanor Ladu. And he was saying, look, if you're going to critique or attack a system or be against it, you have to understand it. You have to know it. And that really struck me, and when I read that, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I want to be a student of neoliberalism. And that motivated me to read a lot of the books that I started reading, to understand how the system works. And so I just want to keep doing that, because I don't think that system is so huge that, I've barely scratched the surface. The second big theme for me was embodiment, and it's something that I've become conscious of, that I'm always in my head. And as a society, I think we prioritize, academics, people who use their heads very well, rational debate, and we don't really spend enough time on the body, and we become very disembodied as a result. And we've talked about this so much. It all goes back to Descartes' mind-body dualism. And so there's so many ways of pursuing embodiment. Like, I highly recommend people check out something called the Embodiment Conference. You can get just a glimpse of like how many different modalities there are if you want to pursue embodiment. And one of the ones that I started practicing last year was this movement philosophy called Feldenkrais. And it's not really like, it's not an exercise or way of stretching. It's more about retraining your brain by doing slow and repetitive movements with your body, so you unlearn old habits and you get so much more awareness of your body. And I found it's actually doing that, it has contributed so much to my feelings of wellness. I think I have much more confidence that if I have a neck ache or whatever, that I can sort of get over it. So that's something I want to keep doing. I'll stop there. I think that's enough for next year. Another thing I want to do is read more fiction, because I think last year I was just like so focused on nonfiction, and but one of my big pleasures in life is just reading great fiction, including genre fiction like science fiction. And so I have a long list of books now that if I have the time, I just want to get lost in.
Yeah, I think your list is just as ambitious as Santosh's. Such big ideas, like concepts about embodiment, and then even just getting into fiction. I mean, even that can take a lot of time. I know, like especially the books that you are going to pick, they're going to be quite grand scale, high concept. So yeah. I guess for me, actually, the way you started Onsu is also the same feelings I have also about the idea about starting a new year, there was this quote that I came across by J. Krishnamurti. I got it right? So, I
Chintu
mean,
Krishnamurti. Yeah.
yes, that's right. And I copied the quote down here, but I'm just going to read parts of it. Basically, he says, like when we say something is new, like a new year, is there really something new under the sun? When we talk about a new and happy year, is it really a new year for us, or is it the same old pattern repeated over and over again, same old rituals, same old traditions and habits? And he keeps going on, like, is there really anything new? And uh, he says something here that really struck me, right? He says, it'd be really marvelous if we could do that, meaning put aside everything and start a new year. Because our lives are rather shallow, superficial, and have very little meaning. We are born whether we like it or not. We are born educated, which may be a hindrance too, and change the whole direction of our lives. Is that possible? Or are condemned forever to lead rather narrow, shoddy, rather meaningless lives? So I mean, look, it sounds pessimistic because of the way that he talk about life being meaningless. But I am a proponent of a existentialist philosophy in the sense that we have to create our own meaning. So I don't see that as a bad thing. And yeah, just coming off like what you said, Onsu, I think I also have to. I looked at my 2021 year resolutions. So I had things about the amount of philosophy I should read, getting deeper into degrowth, economics, and then more personal stuff. Just trying to move more, trying to improve my drawing actually. And I wanted to learn a new language. I wanted to pick up Japanese. So I actually didn't do a lot of that simply because maybe of me spending time on this channel. So I hope to be able to do a bit of that. And I kind of just outlined kind of three themes for me that I'm interested to work on for next year, for this year. So just humor me very quickly. I'll go through it. So there's this article, and I highly recommend our viewers to look for it. It's actually written by a conservative writer, David Brooks. But the title of the essay, which is on Atlantic, if I'm not wrong, is about Emo-Diversity. And he talks about how, picking up from the neuroscientist Lisa Feldman Barrett, right, that we have all these different words, right, for our emotions. But emotions are constructed. We give different names to the kind of emotions that we have. And she champions this idea about emotional granularity, and that the more we can finely identify different body states, so whether it's aggravation, irritation, frustration, hostility, anxiety, the more you can fine tune these words, right, the more effectively you can communicate and perhaps, move about in the world. So just some fun ones that I picked up from the essay. So for example, the Russians have a word called doka, which is kind of a spiritual anguish. In Western Australia, this tribe has this word called nuglu, which is described as the dread you feel when you think someone's trying to seek revenge against you. In Korea, han is a word used to describe a collective acceptance of suffering combined with a quiet hope that things will turn out better. In the Philippines, there's this word, obviously I may not be pronouncing it right, ligit, which describes the angry energy that tends to lead to fights but motivates us to do our best work. And in the essay, he also talks about this particular author called John Koenig, who came up with a book called The Dictionary of Obscure Sorrow. So I'm interested to dive into that book and find more interesting words. And then the other thing, second theme for me, is just being more aware about human limitations and weaknesses. So a book I'm currently getting into is called Knowing Our Limits by Nathan Ballantyne. So I just started reading it. It's a book about epistemology. It's about how do we figure out what's a reasonable and unreasonable opinion. But look, I just want to make it simple enough for all of us to understand. So I studied martial arts. Bruce Lee has this thing about talking about how when we look at human fighting, there is how he says there's no style because we are a creature with 2 hands and 2 legs. So unless it's a different creature that's structurally different with 3 hands or 4 legs, there's only one style of fighting, the human fighting. And I always took that to be a quote to mean that we should always self-examine ourselves in terms of our limitations. And we talk a lot about degrowth, right? So that's also kind of like the way that we try to argue that we need to look at our own human behavior and our psychology, and what are like the limitations that we should be more cognizant about. Where can we overstep that line and imagine ourselves like as if we can always break limits, but the truth is that it can actually get us into deeper crisis. So that's something that I'm very interested in. And the last one, basically, and I think it kind of dovetails with the both of you, which is I'm not going to try to strive too hard for objective goals and competition. I just want to embrace being an amateur. And it has an essay on that as well from this website called Psych. So it's from an author called Xenia Hanuskya. So she's actually a soap operanist, and she talks a lot about music. But you can basically take the same points that she argues in the essay about how we just need to stop being so driven by success and trying to create something great, and be comfortable just taking pleasure in performance for pleasure's sake. And we don't have to worry about being exceptional. There's always some joy to be had in just being a amateur, and it also goes along with the idea about optimal state of flow, where you're really involved in the process of creating something or making something or doing something, and you don't pay too much attention to indicators of competition and ambition and trying to make a deadline. So yeah, that's where I am. That's my 3 themes for this year.
Yeah, I really like the theme of amateurism myself. I think, yeah, I mean, I can see this next year, I'll probably dabble in a lot of different things that will go nowhere, but, it'll be fun, right? So,
Yeah. Santosh?
No, looking at the number of views that we have garnered for breaking the spell, yeah, I think we're great amateurs and we are having good fun. We are playing, we're not like very objective. Yeah, we're not very measured. Like we're not driven by OKRs, objectives and key results like Google, right? Yeah, so it's organic and I like it. It's like art. I think what we're creating is something like art in a certain way, in a certain manner. Yeah.
the art of conversation.
The art of conversation.
Yeah, I have to say, yeah, it's nice to hear from the both of you about what you're looking to do for this year. And I think we all have pretty much some common ideas about not. So the thing I would put it is that yes, at the same time we are looking to better ourselves, but there are some abstract goals or some goods that we're trying to aim for and to develop. And I think it goes along with our channel, right? Which is we are trying to break a certain stagnation that is also found in society. And we also need to be good exemplars of that. We need to show that, at the same time, we are trying to break the old habits that we may have been conditioned by, whether it's by society, by our parents, or just through different structures in life. So yeah, and I just feel that like what you both have said, we do this channel because we just want to have fun. We just want to be ourselves, and we believe that by doing so, there's something worth something aspirational worth looking up to. Yeah, for better or worse.
Well, yeah, I'm personally looking forward to another year of hearty and interesting conversations.
And more mischief for me with the two of you. Yeah.
And me being more of the devil's advocate, that I can promise that. Yeah, the bad cop. Okay, so yeah, we've talked on for quite a while. So thanks if you have been listening this far. We hope to give you pretty hearty, pretty enlightening content in the months to come. And we look forward to hearing from you. So thanks again and signing off.
Bye, guys.